Hey, hello, howdy, how you doing? Ironman. So what is Ironman mode? Well, at its core, it's as simple as no quick saving and no save scumming. That's it. But for this video, I took it a step further and based it off of other games that I love, such as old school RuneScape, where in that game, an Iron Man is someone who has to create their own gear or loot it from their own slain enemies. They can't just trade other players, which to me is the equivalent of just stealing gear in Kenshi. So to Kenshify an Iron Man playthrough, I came up with the following parameters. No stealing or thievery. This is self-explanatory. It's easily the most OP skill in the game and one that I rely on near constantly in every single playthrough I've ever done. Hell, 2 of my most popular Kenshi videos are solely based on thievery. No assassination spamming. This goes hand in hand with thievery, but I feel like just running around as a full-fledged assassin is out of scope for a challenge like this. All gear must be obtained through purchasing it or looting it off of defeated enemies. I can only loot gear off enemies that I've personally killed or knocked out, meaning I can't hang out in Bast or Shem and wait for a fight to wrap up before looting. No save scumming. This one is more personal and it's hard to prove, so we're just gonna go off the honor system and this mod by Bayrock, which removes the autosave feature and unbinds the quick save key. Lastly, this isn't meant to be some crazy over-the-top difficult challenge like, say, the 2 impossible start videos are. I just thought this was a different way to try and play the game, as I typically find myself constantly falling back on thievery, assassination, and save scumming, so removing all of those will force me to play the game in a manner that I'm not used to, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. One final note, I do have a Raycon sponsorship pretty early on, but it's only about 60 seconds, and it's at the start here, so you've been warned. For the start, I went with Deprived, which is brutal difficulty. You start with nothing but severe injuries. Oh, and you're missing an arm. Meet our protagonist. Yes, it is him, the one, the only, John Kenshi. Look at how glorious he is. So with this start, we're missing our right arm, and have substantial injuries to every important piece of his soft, shitty body. Oh, and we're in a recovery coma. And starving. Take all of that, and factor in his magnificent skills. Look, he's so powerful that he's actually hot garbage. Do you know how amazing you have to be to start with negative traits? Not that amazing, but for the sake of the name, just go with it. So, where does John Kenshi find himself on this glorious day 1? Well, all the way down in the southeast near the pits. Not exactly the safest place to start, but it's doable. The building next to John is named the Lost Armory, which was a bit ominous, but enticed me to check it out. Luckily, he only has a slight concussion, so all I had to do was wait a few hours for his head to heal up, and we were back up and moving. Having had all of his skills sapped in some nefarious plot, John Kenshi was unable to pick the lock on the armory, and instead opted to begin limping his way to a nearby town in search of work. This would be the first step towards repairing his tarnished name, but it wouldn't be easy. The journey to Flats Lagoon would take well over a day of travel alone, mainly due to his fragile state. As John Kenshi Bambi-legged his way over the hills and through the valleys, he passed the ruins of an old village. He was starving, but being an honest and noble man, he couldn't fathom the thought of looting the remains of an abandoned village, let alone stealing food and supplies from a hard-working citizen. Now, it is possible that there may have been a survivor or 2 buried under the rubble of the destroyed houses, but John probably couldn't hear them.
Why couldn't he hear them, Preds?
Well, because he was too busy listening to Pink Pony Club on his new Raycon earbuds. Not only do their noise-isolating technology block out the screams of all the villagers being eaten alive by beak things, but their latest models also come with 32 hours of battery life, perfect for those long walks through the desert wasteland.
But Preds, how did John Kenshi afford them? He has no money, and surely these headphones are incredibly expensive, right?
Well, voices in my head, what if I told you that Raycon sells for half the price as other premium brands, allowing someone like John Kenshi to walk away with a pair of earbuds at an astounding deal? In all seriousness, they are a really solid product. If I only have like an hour to work out, I can charge my Raycons for like 10 minutes and get a full hour of use out of them and then some. And to touch on their noise isolation features real quick, I tend to use them while laying with my toddler waiting for her to fall asleep. That way, I can still listen to Pardon My Take without disrupting her sleep routine. Now, luckily for you all, Raycon is offering 20% off if you use my link. All you need to do is go to buyraycon.com/ThatGuyPredz and the deal's all yours. If typing is too much work for you, don't worry, I have the link slapped down in the description and in the pinned comment. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video, and now, back to John Kenshi Simulator. When he wasn't being such a respectable human, he was dodging the Blood Reaver clan to avoid slavery. Such is life in the southern regions of Kenshi. It wasn't all bad though. Around nightfall, he got to witness the filming of Hollywood's new series, Dustnado. It's like Sharknado, but dust instead of sharks. A blockbuster hit for sure. Traveling at night is usually a pretty beautiful spectacle in Kenshi, so it was a real shame that all the stars were blocked out by California-esque smog. Alright, quick fourth wall break. The first 25 minutes of this playthrough were spent running. I'm not even kidding. I spent almost a full 30 minutes running around the southern portion of the map, but I got what I think are some really cool landscape shots, so I'm not complaining. It wouldn't be until the following day that we'd reach Flats Lagoon, but when John finally reached the steps, instead of heading into the bar to take from the barrels behind the walls, he opted to find a copper node and begin his arc as a blue-collared copper miner. It ain't much, but it's honest work. And he can do it with one arm, proving that even disabled people can get a job if they believe in themselves. Look at him go, using his telekinetic powers to use a pickaxe in place of his missing right arm. Truly an inspiration to us all. Now the node was only 60 quality, giving us a maximum efficiency of 30, so this took a while. But we don't need to do this forever, just until we can stash enough cash to buy some food, light armor, and maybe a weapon. All of which can be found inside Flats Lagoon. By around midnight on day 3, John Kenshi had secured a whopping 4 copper and managed to sell that to one of the barkeeps for a few hundred cats, which he then used to purchase a dust witch. Recognizing the man as a legend of old, the barkeep also gave him some cooked vegetables on the house, a token that John would never forget. So the copper ore sells for 180 cats apiece. Accounting for the food in his inventory, John could turn a profit of over 1,000 cats per inventory run. With that rate, we should be able to gear up and get out of here in just a few short days. For now though, it's all about not starving to death while also obtaining some medical supplies, something that the first major haul could deal with. I'd also like to buy a medium thieves backpack, but they're currently selling for 5k. That's a bit steep considering, like I just mentioned, I'm only turning around 1k profit per inventory of copper, and it takes the better half of a day to even secure an inventory's worth. All of that isn't even considering the fact that I'll need to keep buying food as well, or the cost of armor, or a skeleton hand, all adding up to some insane expenses. But since loans and tax write-offs don't exist in Kenshi, it's back to mining. While most of this early portion was rather boring in terms of gameplay, every once in a while I got to do my best Shady McCoy impression and juke the shit out of a beak thing, which, at the very least, kept me on my toes while staring at a man trying to mine with one arm. Regardless, the grind continued. I did make a small business expense here when I purchased a wooden backpack that allows me to stack copper ore inside of it instead of just my inventory. This way, I can go from selling every 10 copper to more like every 60 copper. It costs 800 cats up front, but when you factor in the amount of time it takes for John to run all the way to Flats Lagoon, sell the ore, and then run all the way back to start mining again, it's well worth the price to pay. Like, just look at this. This is 1 day's worth of copper. The only problem now is going to be walking a full backpack's worth over to the barkeep. On the bright side, at least I'll start leveling our strength back up. It would take until day 10 to fully max out my inventory. You heard that right. We've spent the past 9 days doing nothing but staring at this screen and occasionally clicking on the copper ore output box. But it was all worth it. See, a full inventory of 82 copper ore will sell for just short of 15k. That's enough to purchase a backpack, some more supplies, and still have enough left over to purchase a skeleton arm. From there, we'll just need to figure out a way to scavenge up some armor. As it would turn out though, the travel and repairs trader at Flats Lagoon actually had a specialist grade right arm for only 14k. Seeing that I was at 10.5k, I decided to mine for one more day in order to save up enough to purchase said arm. Sure, I could have just bought the standard grade ones for half the price, but this is John Kenshi we're talking about. Anything less than the highest quality simply will not do. Well, I sold all the copper and we're at about 16,000 cats to spend. There's only one problem. The fucking arm is gone. Either the shop reset or someone came in here swinging their dick around and dropped 14k on an arm. The former is more likely, but the latter is funnier, so I'm going with that. At least he had some high quality ones still in stock though. Well, it may have taken 12 days, but we've beaten starvation and have all of our limbs again. With the remaining 6,000 cats, I had John walk over to the armor shop and purchase a high quality set of mercenary armor. All we need now is a weapon. Alright, fine. One more day of mining. After another haul, I went to the headgear store and had John pick up a cowboy hat with some super cool goggles. Now that he's sufficiently dripped out, I spent another 2k on a toothpick bow and a set of bolts. It's important to remember though, all of these dead animals are off limits for looting. We're only allowed to loot creatures that we've already killed or knocked unconscious. So, it's been 13 days and no combat. Let's change that. As John Kenshi roamed the plains of Shem, he happened across a group of dust bandits. What a perfect opportunity to test out our new bow. This only lasted a few moments though before a group of nomads came wandering in to clean up the fight. Luckily, one rogue bandit continued chasing John, who was able to flip the fight on him and take him out with 15 bolts to the chest. After looting the downed bandit for a piece of leg armor, he turned around to see a big thing approaching, leading to yet another fight. One thing I noticed during this fight was the 3 or 4 beak things just feasting on all the downed bandits and nomads in the background. Tragic. No time for that now though, John's just defeated the beak thing, which means we can loot it for all of its raw meat and hides. After cooking the meat, John crossed paths with his first land bat of the playthrough just outside of Flats Lagoon. This gave us a few more hides that we sold at Flats for a decent profit. Not bad for our first day with a bow. Instead of paying 200 cats for a bed at one of the bars, I opted at making our own camp just outside of town where I could cook some more pieces of meat and rest for free. Now that we have some gear, there's a plethora of shit we need to get done. Things like grinding skills, getting more cats, building an outpost, all pretty important for this playthrough, and I wasn't sure what to do first. So I figured, why not go back east and see what I could hunt for or find that could be sold for cash. If nothing else, it's a chance to explore, gather some more food, and hopefully find some cool shit. Like a Leviathan, for example. Now, I don't have the firepower or the range to safely take one of these out right now. But you know who does? Sniper bots. The only problem with sniper bots is they walk around with eagle's crosses, and those have like 10 times the range of a junk bow. But, if John Kenshi could kill one, we could loot one of those bows, and we'd have a massive upgrade to both firepower and range. Before we reach the sniper bots though, we need to fight back this black gorilla. It's like a white gorilla, but bigger, faster, and I don't know, probably has bigger feet or something that the white gorillas are secretly jealous of, and probably at least a little insecure about. Now, was it worth it to kill this thing? I mean, no, probably not. I got like 8 hides out of it, which will sell for 1,600 cats, but now I'm encumbered and don't have any more storage in the backpack. Anyway, the most frustrating thing about sniper bots is the fact that when you don't want beef with them, they're everywhere. But when you want to find them, they're all in fucking hiding. As it would turn out, this was a massive blessing in disguise for John Kenshi, as he had already burned through all of his bolts fighting the damn gorilla, leaving him entirely out of ammo. This became an issue almost immediately as a group of skeleton bandits jumped poor John Kenshi, leaving him unconscious in the dirt. On the bright side, this didn't kill him, and he managed to boost his toughness from -2 up to 7. Alright, admittedly, I might have bitten off more than I could chew here. Not only did I underestimate the enemies down here, but I also completely forgot to buy John a skeleton repair kit, so he's back to being a gimp for the time being. At least until we make it back to Flats. Who the fuck is Leaf? And why are they walking so close to John? Like, you have the entire wasteland. Spread out. Oh, lovely. After failing to hide her purse, Leaf was attacked by a black gorilla who immediately turned on John, knocking him unconscious yet again. This was a massive close call, mainly because it knocked him into a recovery coma and without the ability to heal his chest. Luckily, his chest was only -16 when he was knocked into a coma, and he'd healed himself prior to the fight taking place. Otherwise, the wound would have just continued getting worse and he'd have never woken up. But not this time. Not today. After regaining consciousness, John was able to patch himself up, stabilize Leaf, and rest next to her until she was close to recovering from her coma. On the morning of day 16, John was healed enough to throw Leaf onto his back and begin making his way over to the nearby city of Morn. Why Morn and not back to Flats Lagoon? Well, because Morn has cages outside of it, and those cages can be used to, convince people to join our cause. Like Leaf here. Of course, before we reach Morn, we'll need to outsmart a black gorilla by trapping it on weird plants growing in the area. It was only after Leaf was placed in the cage that I was made aware that I couldn't recruit her. Well, guess she's staying here then. Anyway, welcome to Flint, Michigan, or Morn. It comes equipped with decrepit buildings, weird homeless people, and Trader Joe's that we can use to buy a cheap skeleton repair kit at. Now that we have the use of all of our limbs again, it's time to do something a bit more simple and start collecting bounties. That'll be an easy way to earn some quick cash that I can use to begin building an outpost to craft better armor, allowing us to snowball out of control. Our first target? A group of Sheks hanging out around Shem. Specifically, Xander. He's one of the leaders of the Band of Bones, and he's not alone. The goal is simple. Kidnap Xander, turn him in, collect bounty. But he's got some bodyguards defending him, so we'll have to work through them first before taking him on. Originally, I tried having John fight the entire group at once, but quickly realized that this wasn't going to get me anywhere. So instead, I separated the group and began picking off the guards one at a time. After a night of kiting around Xander and one of his bodyguards, John took a shot to the stomach, leaving him in yet another recovery coma. The most frustrating part about this is the fact that Xander was literally one shot away from getting knocked into a blood loss coma. After spending half a day in a coma himself, John finally woke up, only to spend the rest of the day sleeping near the water to heal up. I feel like I missed something here. While Plank posed for his OnlyFans photo shoot, John Kenshi got back to fighting Xander. Once he was unconscious, I looted him for his fragment axe and t-shirt before kidnapping him to hand over to the Sheks. Welcome to Squin. It's one of my favorite cities in the game and one I tend to farm thievery in by stealing tons of food and gear from in almost every playthrough I have. Obviously, this time we're here under a different set of circumstances, so after turning in Xander, I collected his 10,000 cat bounty and immediately headed over to the weaponsmith to purchase a longsword. With the remaining cash, I scooped up a few more sets of bolts and began plotting John's next move. Time for another bounty. We're staying with the Band of Bones clan, but this time targeting Tora the Fearless. She's hanging out beneath a way station in the Sten Desert with about 15 bodyguards accompanying her. Along with a 10,000 cat bounty, I can sell the supplies off of her men and walk away with a pretty solid payday. It's also giving me a chance to train some combat skills since the guys here are nothing crazy and all fall in the 20s or 30s for stats. In his ever-increasing quest for knowledge, John Kenshi headed down to the camp to ask why all the Sheks' horns were missing. Well, they didn't like that very much, so instead of answering, they jumped poor John Kenshi, leaving him unconscious in the dirt. He sustained damage to his stomach and both legs, leaving him unable to fight. Bounty hunting is a dangerous business, and these were the consequences of going in unprepared. But this is Kenshi, and the only way to improve is to fail repeatedly. There's a metaphor for life somewhere in there if you want to read too deep into things, but what I'm trying to say is, we need someone who can rescue John when he's inevitably left for dead. And I know just the man for the job. Oh, there he is, everyone's favorite lovable war crime enthusiast. On their way back to the way station in the south, Beep dropped a bit of lore on John Kenshi as he talked about how he hates seeing the high villages. Surely that wasn't a bout of any obvious foreshadowing of things yet to come, right? So, we're back at the Band of Bones camp. Here's how this works. John goes down to fight, kites the Band of Bones grunts around with his junk bow, and inevitably gets his ass kicked. Once that happens, Beep, who's up hiding at the way station, runs down and scoops up John, carrying him back to their camp where he can rest and recover until the next attack. We then repeat this process over and over and over again until we have Tora, or John dies. Anyway, let's get to it. The first fight went way better than expected, mainly because crossbows are OP. John managed to kite 3 grunts around for about 5 hours, slowly ticking damage onto them with each landed shot. He even managed to take one of them down with him, which I wasn't expecting. This is Beep's time to shine though. With the first grunt looted, Beep brought John back to camp just as he regained consciousness, at which point John healed himself and laid down at the campsite while Beep went back to the way station to slam some rum and chat with the local bar patrons. So throughout my time making videos on Kenshi, there's always been a vocal minority of players who tell me I need to try junk bows more often, and I never took them seriously. Until now. Because I can 100% see how they can become the best weapon in the game, at least when it comes to 1v1s. This is a standard grade bow, and it reloads in about 2 or 3 seconds. The Masterwork bows have a max reload speed of like 1.7 seconds, and when you factor in high crossbow skill, you can effectively rapid fire bolts at your enemies. Not only does this massively increase your DPS, But how about the fact that you can almost infinitely stun lock an enemy? Hell, John's crossbow skill is like mid-20s and he's almost able to pull it off here. I can't imagine what this is going to look like in a few days. Anyway, with each bodyguard incapacitated, I'd have John loot them and sell their gear to the traders at the way station. This, honestly, probably could have been completed in a day or two, but I was committed to getting John's melee attack up, which was easier said than done because good God was he ass at it. The best way for me to go about this early on was to continue looting the Band of Bones soldiers, leaving them without armor or weapons, and allowing John to just kinda wail on them with his longsword. And even then, most of the time it would end with John Kenshi back in a coma, where we'd sacrifice the better half of a day before he was ready for battle again. It wasn't until around midnight on day 22 that I realized I could train both crossbows and melee at the same time by taking advantage of the crossbow's stagger impact, and then running up and using John's longsword to land an extra hit. This only worked with single target enemies, but it was still something I utilized a ton when starting out. After waking up on day 23, John looked down on the camp to see a pack of bone dogs savaging the clan. Not wanting to miss out on the fun, I sent John in to assist the bone dogs in their fight. That same day, while taking on a few stragglers outside of the camp, a group of drug peddlers came waltzing in, wiping out the entire Band of Bones camp and allowing John Kenshi to finally capture Tora the Fearless. Funny enough, he must have already beaten her in combat at some point, and I just wasn't paying attention because all of her gear had already been stripped from her. When all of this started back on day 20, John had 22 toughness, 7 dexterity, 17 perception, 1 melee attack, 11 defense, 17 dodge, and 22 crossbow. By the time I'd made it back to Squin on day 23, John's new stats looked like this. Toughness is up 13 levels to 35, dexterity almost tripled from 7 to 19, perception is up to 28, melee attack is at 9 from 1, defense is 26 from 11, dodge is only up 1 level to 18, but crossbows are up to 35. Not bad for a few days of non-cheese grinding. Anyway, with Tora handed over, we're now up to 26,000 cats. With that cash, I purchased some shitty samurai armor and a fragment axe. John Kenshi's strength isn't high enough to carry all this gear to where we need to go, but hopefully he will be soon. In the meantime, we can pull off a bit of Kenshi cheese, throw it all in a backpack, give it to Beep, and then have John Kenshi ragdoll Beep over his shoulders at no extra weight cost. One place that I've never been to in all my hours of playtime is Raptor Island. So we're gonna change that today. Mainly because I was watching a few guides on how to cheese strength XP, and it's one of the only places that came up repeatedly by like 10 different content creators, all for a variety of reasons. So I wanted to try it out and break away from the tried and true backpack of iron and a bone dog over the shoulder grind. It also gives me an excuse to turn John Kenshi into Michael Phelps in a few short days. Before I could do that though, I'd have to run along the coastline all the way to the northwest of the map, navigating through herds of beak things and cannibals. At least we get to watch the sunset though. Alright, from the shoreline to Raptor Island. This small portion of open water, John Kenshi managed to go from swimming level 42 all the way up to 61. 19 levels in just a few in-game hours. I'll take it. Okay, we're here. Let's give this a shot. Lovely. Nothing like spending the first day of a tropical getaway in a recovery coma, right fellas? Who knows, maybe this will just be something that's better for his toughness than anything else. This is gonna be a long process. So this clearly wasn't working, because, as it turns out, half-assing a strategy and ignoring half of a guide isn't the best way to go about things. Who would have guessed? Anyway, instead of repeating this process over until I accidentally kill John, I'm falling back on a more reliable method of singling out one raptor, dropping it with a bow, then placing it in the sleeping bag and loading the save so that it's stuck in the sleeping bag, allowing John Kenshi to smack the shit out of it in peace. The only problem now is that the raptor isn't hostile towards me. That's where Tammy Slayton comes in though. Meet the Mega Raptor. Not only did I just find out about this thing like 10 minutes ago, but it's going to become vital to our grind. Obviously, it's a boss, right? Well, according to Reddit, if you piss it off, all the raptors on the island become hostile towards you. So hi, I'm John Kenshi, and welcome to Jackass. Those fucking liars. On the bright side, Raptor Island has 100 fertility when prospecting on it, and has a massive iron node that can be used for making our own gear later on. There's even some spots that'll make for decent stone mines here too. It looks like the only thing the island doesn't have is a copper node, but I'm sure I could find a way to work around that, whether that's purchasing our own supplies as needed, or finding a node on land and then mass hauling it back over to the island. With one last attempt at salvaging the journey, I assigned John to hunt for a few river raptors, only for them to each drop 1 hide and about 6 foul meat. I'm not giving up though. I'm committed to getting our skills up without walking around with a bag full of iron. And my next attempt was basically the same thing, but with a gorilla, since they're typically always hostile towards the player. Funny enough, I left Raptor Island without gaining a single level in strength. Peak efficiency, people. That's what we're all about. At least our swimming grind is coming along nicely. Shout out the Wandering Trader, just out here swimming to random obscure islands for the love of the game. Anyway, just off the coast of Vane, the duo happened upon a white gorilla. Now, it's worth noting that its stats are less than a black gorilla, but it'll still get the job done. All we need to do now is repeat the process with the river raptor, shoot the hell out of it with a crossbow, throw it in a sleeping mat, and boom, free XP. Even with all the weight added on his shoulders, John Kenshi only earns about 2% of a strength level per landed hit. It's still better than nothing though. While waiting for the gorilla to recover, I'd use that old tried and true method of walking around while carrying Beep. After spending about 2 days grinding strength up to 38, I decided to move on to other things. Mainly because this was just getting really boring and the payoff didn't feel like it was worth it anymore. So, aside from only being able to obtain gear by purchasing it or killing enemies, the other aspect of this challenge was to create my own items, and you need an outpost to do that. So, having just spent a day or two on Raptor Island, I think it's time to make our dream outpost a reality. If I had to take a guess, I'd say the raids will likely be cannibals, but I'm also wondering if I could just kite them into the Mega Raptor and let that deal with them until I have suitable defenses built out. The plan is simple. Set up an outpost on Raptor Island, use Mongrel or some Hiver villages to purchase any supplies that I needed to get started, and farm the land and iron nodes for the rest of my supplies. There's also a shit ton of copper nodes along the coast that I found while training on a gorilla that I can use to help farm out those materials. Not entirely sure if 14k is going to be enough, but it should give us a decent starting point. Hopefully. To start, I placed blueprints for a small shack and set up a campsite to rest at, before sending John Kenshi on a return journey to Mongrel to purchase some building materials to get started with. In terms of items, I went with 9 building materials, 24 books, 2 cacti, and 2 wheat straw. This is enough to build a small shack and research bench, and then start researching some farming plots for wheat and cacti farms, which can be used to make dust switches, so we never have to worry about food again. At the time that was going on, a farming trader reached Raptor Island, so Beep bought some hemp and cotton, because I'm pretty sure at least one of those crops is used for armor. With John back on Raptor Island, we officially started work on our outpost, named New Tahiti, with the hopes of attracting Dutch Vanderlyn to the establishment. Anyway, with the research bench finally built, I queued up about a dozen tasks and set John to start working through those. With John researching a bunch of random shit, I had Beep pick up a river raptor and set him to start grinding strength in the meantime. It took most of day 33 to burn through a lot of the research that I'd queued up, but honestly, I was too busy playing Retro Bowl to pay attention. That being said, we can plant wheat straw and cacti gardens now. We just need 25 wheat straw and 20 cacti to get them started. Oh, and 5 building materials for a well. Back to Mongrel. Well, it cost practically all of our cats, but I managed to fill up 3 wooden backpacks full of wheat straw, cacti, building materials, and iron plates, all of which are needed to continue expanding our outpost. With the farms and wells built out, we can now finally start gardening. This was largely left up to Beep, as John was how the duo made their money. We still need things like storage, defensive walls, and harpoon turrets, along with a plethora of other things like anyone would need to run an outpost effectively. Oh, and the kitchen. We still need a kitchen. To start, the focus was on a grain silo, bread oven, and storage. This way, Beep could be kept busy with growing wheat straw, turning it into grain, and then using that grain to make bread, which could be used for dust switches at a later date. That being said, we're down to under 1,000 cats, and we still need a ton of building materials. So, looks like it's time for another bounty. West Dragon, the long-lost sister of West Mantooth, can be found in the layout of what should be a town, but it's just her, and she's got a 20,000 cat bounty on her head. One that I'd love to cash in. As soon as I attacked her though, a group of hungry bandits seized the opportunity and swooped in to steal the bounty from John. I ended up using this to my advantage though and kited the bandits into West Dragon while I did a giant loop around the area. With West Dragon already wounded, all I had to do was use the junk bow and kite her around the property for a few hours until she passed out from blood loss, allowing me to loot her for her katana and armor before heading over to the nearest Holy Nation city to drop her off at. After removing John Kenshi's robotic limb, of course. We can't be making enemies with one of the most powerful factions in Kenshi, can we? So, first major problem with Raptor Island. The raptors eat all of the fucking crops. That's gonna need to be addressed. Not even the great John Kenshi could hold off the river raptors here. The solution? Send John back to Mongrel to purchase more supplies that we could use to build a better house, a T2 research bench, and other shit like that, while Beep kept working the wells to stockpile enough water so that once the farms were ready, we could just go nuts to butts on it. Over the next few days, while Beep worked the wells, John Kenshi built out general storage, a second house, and an additional research bench, all the while slowly burning through our entire savings yet again. Anyway, with those built, we can do things like discover the technology needed to mine stone, and then process that stone into building materials that can be used to build stuff, even things. When looking back at the camp, it was clear we needed more hands. 2 people just isn't enough to man 2 wells, 2 gardens, a stone mine, and a stone processor, let alone baking bread or using that bread to make sandwiches, and then what about armor crafting? Long story short, we need to recruit some helpers. And who better to help us out than a slew of hungry bandits? So here's the plan. West Dragon's old outpost has a bunch of cages over there. I fight the bandits, throw them in the cage, and give them the old NCAA treatment until they agree to work for me for free. All we needed to do now was fight a group of them, and we'd be so— oh my god, they beat John. I tried again with some dust bandits, but it's a bit difficult to isolate just one of them when you can't stealth your way in and knock them out. No matter though, it just means John Kenshi must wander the plains in search of another group of hungry bandits, where he could use his junk bow to knock one out and kidnap them. The only thing that could go wrong at this point would be if the Holy Nation attacked John while he was in the middle of coercing some starving bandits into joining his cause. Thank God John Kenshi knows the layout of the map, and had enough brain cells left to bait the Holy Nation patrol into engaging a Fogmen camp. Unfortunately, these cages weren't what I was expecting, and I wasn't able to recruit the hungry bandit. Instead, he just kinda teleported out of existence when I finally unlocked the cage. Not a problem though, we'll just have to change to more traditional methods. And by that I mean hitting up a bar in Squin and recruiting Ruka and Oran for the low cost of 3,500 cats. With these 2 lovely Shek ladies now onboarded as our new employees, John and Beep were free to do other things, like begin building out the defensive perimeter to stop river raptors from destroying our crops. With everyone doing their part, the outpost was really coming together. Sure, progress was slow, but slow is better than non-existent. So here's how production works. John handles the research and building. For at least the next day or 2, he'll be solely assigned to research to finish up the queue we currently have for it. While he does that, Beep works in the stone mines, bringing stone to the processor, where Ruka and Oran turn that stone into building materials. Once we have a solid 40 or 50 of those, John will swap over to building to start completing the remainder of the walls. So, I kinda fucked up. The stone processor and the first upgrade for it don't use any power, but the tier 2 stone processor requires power. We don't have that, meaning we can't make any more building materials until we get some. In order to research the necessary prerequisites to make power, we're going to need more books, or at the very least, cash for 6 more iron plates to make regular stone processors again. Just kidding, I'm an idiot and forgot you can simply downgrade the item back to what it was. Crisis averted, everyone. Carry on. Next problem. Everyone's hungry, and we don't have any money for food. Naturally, you'd assume we could just hunt river raptors, but they have literally nothing of value on them, so it'd be pointless. Now, we could go find another bounty, and if I happen across one, surely I'll take it, but for now, John was sent to hunt down some bone dogs or any other monster that we could cook into dried meat for the group. After spending most of the day wandering the desert, John finally came across a gorillo. It's no burning bush, but it'll do. Now, gorillas don't have any raw meat that you can loot off of them when they die, but they do have 6 animal hide, which can be sold for like 1,000 cats, which can then be used to purchase meat. I did almost end poor John Kenshi's life here when I got cute with it and had him swap to the fragment axe to keep working on his melee attack, only for him to be incapacitated twice by the gorillo. That being said, I still managed to turn these 6 animal hides into 24 raw meat, which can be cooked into dried meat at a campfire in New Tahiti. With everyone fed and taken care of, it's time to get back to work. It would take another 8 hours or so to finish up the research queue, at which point John swapped over to the stone processor to lend Oron and Ruka a hand with producing building materials at a faster rate. This would go on for another day until I felt we had enough building materials for John to begin working on the walls. And thus, it's time for a time lapse. Well, it's day 51 now, and while there are still a few pieces of wall to finish up, it's mostly completed. The reason for stopping it early? Everyone's starving again. So, I opted to begin watering the crops again in hopes that the gates and walls would keep the river raptors out. I won't be able to make any dust witches yet, but we should be able to make a few pieces of bread to prevent everyone from starving to death. Oh, lovely. No one told me these things can phase through fucking walls. Anyway, while we wait for crops to grow, I set Oron and Ruka to sleep. This reduces their hunger rate down to 33% of the normal rate. So, not only can they phase through walls, but the raptors can organize and assault the front gate in hopes of reaching the crops. Luckily, they're easily distracted, and I managed to get most of them to follow Oron and Ruka to the other side of the island, while Beep and John grabbed the remaining raptors and pulled them outside the gate as well. It was only after I'd pulled everyone outside the walls that I realized that practically the entire group was unconscious, except for Beep. So his job then changed to keep kiting the raptors around, while John regained consciousness and was able to stabilize both Oron and Ruka. All of this work just for another group of river raptors to sneak in and eat our crops. So, we need food, iron plates, building materials, defensive crossbow turrets, books to research those turrets, and so much more. To distill it down to one thing though, we just need more money. So what's the plan? Well, the goal was to find some more bounties, but then I remembered Fogman Prince heads can be sold for 6k a piece, so it's back to Mongrel. Typically, a Fog Prince roams around with a few Fog Heavies at his side, neither of which are immune to a few dozen bolts to the chest. Actually, maybe they are. By this point, Oron and Ruka were on the verge of starving to death, so instead of continuing to hunt Fog Princes, it was back to manual labor. Oran and Ruka were able to swim to the shores, setting up sleeping mats, and rest there while Beep began making runs to and from Mongrel to deliver food for them, while John continued to mine iron and sell it for said food. Now, could I have just sold the fragment axe? Sure, but that's lame. To add insult to injury, Beep was kidnapped while on his way back to Oran and Ruka, causing John to head on over and rescue him. Unfortunately, Beep's legs were too wounded to make the return journey, so the two swapped places, with Beep continuing to mine iron while John Kenshi himself made the runs to save Oran and Ruka's lives. We finally caught a lucky break when, during one of the food runs, John passed by a drifter who was being eaten alive by none other than a fog prince, and he was alone. The fight was pretty easy. I just had John fire a bunch of bolts into the prince before finishing him off with his saber. A Fog Prince head sells for 6,000 cats in Mongrel, so we're in for a solid payday soon. To cap off the victory, John found and freed the sole survivor of the camp, a hungry bandit with a broken leg. While Beep sold the prince's head, John was off on another mission to explore the surrounding area. There was a fog-covered ruin in the distance, but it was only after arriving there that he discovered its true nature. Welcome to the Fog King's hideout, or throne room, whichever you want to go with. It's guarded by no less than 24 fogmen, a dozen or so fog heavies, and a group of princes, making this an incredibly lucrative camp, if they could all be defeated. The plan was to primarily use the junk bow to shave off a few fogmen, before swapping to the fragment axe or the saber to finish off the remaining drones. The only problem with that is I don't think John has enough bolts to take out an entire division of fogmen. In total, he only managed to incapacitate 2, maybe 3 fogmen before being forced to retreat. At this point, I just said fuck it and had John use the entire faction's savings to purchase about 20 books, before spending the rest on dried meat to keep everyone fed. With everything crammed into his backpack and shorts, he ran back, restocked Oran and Ruka on food, and swam back to New Tahiti. Beep would stay behind, working the iron mines at Mongrel in order to provide a stable, blue-collar income for the team, which would help keep everyone fed in the interim. With the recently purchased books, I added things like wind generator theory, biofuel, and fuel generator theory to the queue. I'd love to add things like batteries, battery power, and harpoons, but they require a tier 3 workbench and an ancient science book, and I don't have 10 extra iron plates to spare at the moment. On the bright side though, I do know where to find an ancient science book, or at least where to start looking. The Floodlands are covered with ruins and abandoned towers, all holding some insanely OP items. See what I mean? In addition to all the ruins in the area, you can also find one of my personal favorite characters in Kenshi, Burn, and his tower. In a normal playthrough, most players, myself included, take advantage of the amenities that Burn's tower offers, such as free access to a skeleton repair bed. But in our case, we have bigger plans for Burn. He will be our general and lead our defensive units. Once I get some. That'll happen on later on though, kind of the final step in securing the outpost. While John and Burn made their way back to New Tahiti, Beep sold all of his iron, using the profits to purchase 9 iron plates and some fabric to begin making beds with back at camp. The iron plates could be used to upgrade the research bench to tier 3, giving the group much more to work with in terms of defenses and increasing the quality of production. I had another oh shit moment where I upgraded the research bench only to be reminded that I need power for it, but luckily, like the stone processor, quickly remembered that I could just downgrade it back to the tier 2 bench and continue working as if nothing happened. With wind generators unlocked, I placed blueprints for 2 wind turbines and got to work retrieving the supplies needed. For starters, 8 iron plates. Instead of pulling from the 11 we had on us, I had Beep build out an iron refinery. That way, we could harvest iron from the nodes on the island and convert that to an infinite amount of iron plates, which could then be used on whatever other projects popped up over time. We'll need copper for the wind turbines as well, and while I could go mine iron and then sell that to buy some copper, I took advantage of the copper node just off of the shore of New Tahiti. It's only 10 quality, so it's hot garbage, but it gave Oron something to do while the others focused on their new tasks. Once we were all caught up on research, I had John swap over to the iron refinery to begin production on iron plates. During our little base grind, we underwent our first Triangle Bandit raid on the outpost. Now, I wasn't expecting a victory here, but I wanted to get a benchmark for where we stood when it came to raids. The answer? Not good. Bad. Very bad. One might even say horrendous. Like watching the Cowboys try to win a playoff game against Green Bay levels of ass kicking. With everyone either wounded or in comas, John took the time to build out 2 beds so the group could alternate resting while the rest of the team worked building. Throughout the next few days, our sole focus was on completing the wind turbines. These would allow us to upgrade our research bench, the stone processor, and iron refinery, which would not only drastically speed up production of the necessary materials, but would allow us to begin researching harpoons for our wall defenses. All of this to stop some goddamn river raptors from eating our crops. By the end of day 59, we'd built out 1 turbine, upgraded the research bench to tier 3, and were finalizing plans to begin building out prototype harpoon turrets across the wall, facing the rest of the island. I also began research on imprisonment, but that's for recruiting some guards later on. Don't worry about that right now. Okay. Wasn't aware that harpoons cost so much to make and require power, but there's no denying how powerful they can be in live use. I'll just need to figure out how to make steel. I ended up placing 3 harpoon turrets before spending the rest of the day researching steel production. To increase efficiency, I made the risky decision and pulled Oren off of the 10 quality copper node. Instead, their job would be over on the iron refinery making iron plates. The reasoning was simple. I can make an infinite amount of them, and they sell for 140 cats apiece. Copper sells for 215 apiece here, but it's the highest valued item that we can trade with. Because of that, I loaded up John Kenshi's bag with as many iron plates as he could carry, along with some of the gear he'd looted from the ruins in the floodlands, and sent him off to a nearby Hiver village to acquire more copper. There was just one problem. The Hivers didn't have any copper. Looks like it's back to Mongrel. After another day or 2 of working around the base, we placed a blueprint for a steel refinery, finished off the 2nd wind turbine, and even got started building out the crossbows. The steel refinery takes 20 iron plates to craft, and we still need about 20 more iron plates to craft the 3 harpoons needed to defend the outpost. Which is just a long-winded way of me saying it was all hands on deck for the iron refinery. And if we're gonna have all hands on deck, we're gonna need a better iron refinery. Thus, an additional 10 iron plates are needed. Once the steel refinery was completed, we then needed to make more iron plates, and use those to turn into steel bars. It takes 4 plates per 1 steel bar. So many iron plates. During all of this, a scrawny cannibal raid came through and fucked up our entire process for the better half of a day. But surprisingly, the raid actually worked out in our favor, as they ended up getting assaulted by the river raptors roaming the island. While the cannibals were subsequently wiped out, they did manage to take a few river raptors down with them. It would take until the morning of day 63 to build up 2 harpoon turrets, at which point I had Ruka head back to the gardens and start manning the wheat straw fields, while John headed out to go gather some more food for the group. At this point, I decided to sell West Dragon's katana that I'd looted off for a while back, along with 2 generator cores. This would give the faction close to 20k, though I'd spend about half of it on provisions, mainly dried fish. With the whole team well fed and recovering, we got back to work finishing off the third harpoon turret, completing our first attempt at our defenses. At first glance, we were crushing it, dealing with the first wave in just a few seconds. But we couldn't have imagined what would follow. An all-out raptor rampage. Dozens of river raptors flooded the gate, quickly destroying it and pushing inside. Ruka and Beep were meant to slow them down, but it was more like throwing a piece of single-ply toilet paper at a tiger. Sensing the impending destruction of the farms, John left the harpoon and opted to kite the raptors around with his junk bow, all while Beep picked off the targets at range with one of the other harpoon turrets. This took a few more minutes to fight through until I noticed that Beep and Ruka were dying. It was either them or the crops, so John dropped his bow and sprinted over to save both Beep and Ruka. This is where Burn came in clutch. While John was healing the two companions, Burn caught the attention of the raptors, giving John enough time to stabilize the two and head back out to hold off the remaining raptors. Until he took a shot to the chest and was knocked unconscious. Time for Burn to save the day yet again by kiting the raptors around for almost 2 full minutes until John woke up and got back in the fight. Just as things were beginning to wind down, another group of river raptors came swarming in from the gate on the opposite end of the base. Thus, a strategy was born. What if we could pull the river raptors to the north end of the outpost, back near the harpoons? Then, Burn and Beep could fire harpoons into them, while John Kenshi looped them in circles. A good plan in theory, but horribly executed due to some of the raptors becoming expert strategists and simply attacking the walls. With everyone knocked out or dying, the raptors were free to once again pillage our crops. On the bright side, we were able to loot a ton of the slaughtered raptors for a shit ton of foul meat for Beep and hides to sell. It's obvious that we'll need more harpoons and more soldiers to defend the fields with. This calls for a John Kenshi and Beep mission. Together, the two would embark on a multi-day trek to Venge. Yes, Venge. If you're an OG, you probably know why I'm going there, but if you're new to Kenshi, it's the laser god beam death ray place. It's also loaded with these guys. Now, I got a lot of shit for calling them the wrong name in that Impossible Start video last year, so let me see if I can make amends. Thrall, Like wall, but with a Modern Warfare hit marker sound at the beginning. Did I say it right? The best part about these guys is you can right-click on any of them, and only that specific thrall will come after you, abandoning the rest of the group. Once you take it out, you can throw it in a cage, and with the help of the Recruit Prisoners mod, you can do just that, and recruit the prisoner. Except with thralls, you now need to guess a correct sequence of codes to convert them to the cause. Now, after spending about 15 minutes fucking this up over and over again, I took to Reddit, where I was able to find the correct sequence to use. Fun fact, it's actually option number 3, right here. It's that sequence. After recruiting one, it became a rinse and repeat process of distracting one, separating him from the rest of the group, knocking them out, and then rewiring them to serve our cause. After recruiting 5 skeletons to the team, I sent them back to New Tahiti, with John and Beep following close behind. Beep had been knocked into a recovery coma by a group of thrall while transporting one back to the rehabilitation center, so John carried him back slumped over his shoulder. Most of the return journey was quiet. There was only one real moment where we had any conflict, and even calling it conflict is a bit of a stretch. It was really just a group of escaped servants trying to jump the skeletons. But all John Kenshi had to do was poke them with a stick a few times, and they gave up. As the skeletons were guided back through the gates, they were immediately thrown into their first battle with the raptors. So, how did it go? Well, I'll just show you. We're gonna need more harpoons. Now, we didn't lose anyone in the fight, so at least there's that. We'll just need to be better prepared for the next raid. To start with, I added 2 more harpoon turrets to the front wall. Then, I placed blueprints for another storm house to be constructed next to the farms, where more harpoon turrets could be mounted on the rooftops. This would serve as more of a fallback point that we could retreat to once the gates had been breached. The biggest hurdle we'll need to jump over now is the shortage of copper. We still have about 1,700 cats in the savings though, so I sent Ruka back off to Flats Lagoon to buy as much as she could. When another raptor patrol reached our gates, I set everyone to passive, opting to let them through one last time to destroy our crops. Even though the order was given to stand down, it would seem that no one really gave a shit and chose to fight anyway. And because of this fight, I discovered how to beat these things. We need more harpoons, sure, that's a given, but all I really need to do is have like 1 or 2 people kite the raptors around while the thralls gun them down with harpoon fire. Just take a look. I want you guys to know that Beep slept through all of that. While picking off a few of the stragglers, most of our group was incapacitated, but I was still happy with the outcome. Until another patrol came waltzing in to destroy our farms yet again. To make matters worse, we're down to half a skeleton repair kit, meaning we're gonna need to start crafting repair beds or get into the business of crafting our own repair kits, and I'm pretty sure those require copper. Speaking of which, Ruka was able to purchase about 9 copper ore, enough to finish building 3 more harpoon turrets, so that'll be nice. Oh, and more foul meat for Beep to snack on, so I'm sure he's happy with that at least. I'm not even kidding, he's up to a whole backpack full and then some. That's like 140 pieces of foul meat, and there's still more of it. While Beep was collecting hundreds of foul meat, Ruka was attacked by a pack of fogmen. I did try to buy as much time as possible by setting her to block only so that John Kenshi himself could come rescue her, but that only got us a few extra seconds before she was knocked out and tied to a pole. It wasn't long until the princes came over, and the rest was history. Now, credit where it's due, she did manage to escape a few times, but it was futile. She'd be immediately picked back up, thrown back on the pole, and the feast would resume. She never stood a chance. And to make matters worse, all the copper I dropped off her body had despawned before John Kenshi could make it to the camp. Oh, and on top of that, we got a Triangle Bandit raid heading towards New Tahiti. Luckily, John Kenshi was able to intercept them to buy us some time to get everyone into the ocean, and if all of that wasn't enough, a cannibal tribe was also getting ready to raid us too. Don't worry though, they mostly just all fought each other instead of doing anything productive with their time. And when they weren't fighting each other, they were busy getting long swords to the face, courtesy of John Kenshi. Thankfully, Beep has made it to Mongrel and traded in the hides to come up with most of the copper that we lost when Ruka went down. It would take until day 73 before we'd have all but one harpoon turret up and operational. Want to see him in action? Okay, sure, that was only like 3 raptors, but what about a larger group? Honestly, pretty similar. The only real issue with this setup is that once the raptors make it up onto the walls, all of the thrall just blind fire down the walkway, with the one at the far end often receiving the Pat Tillman treatment. The battle was hard fought, but we walked away victorious, and we didn't lose a single thrall in the entire fight. Sure, some are horribly mutilated now, but just don't look at them. Don't worry, there's more raptors on the way though. Alright, back-to-back dubs. We take those. And we get a beautiful Kenshi sunrise. We don't deserve this game. After like 50 days of duking it out with river raptors, we were finally able to harvest our first round of crops, netting us a whole 16 wheat straw, which all went directly into the grain silo so that we could start making bread. Unfortunately, it takes 10 wheat straw to make 1 bag of straw flour, which can then be combined with water to make 1 piece of bread. With our first harvest of the playthrough completed, we can get back to the important things, like researching weaponsmithing so we can start making some actual money. I will say, it's a very cathartic feeling being able to not just hold off the river raptors now, but to full on wipe out entire nests of them. Something tells me we're through the worst of it. Now that the river raptors aren't the main concern anymore, I was able to do things like upgrade our refineries to increase production yet again, start regularly harvesting crops, and then using those crops to make larger farms. We're still dealing with the occasional friendly fire moment from the harpoon turrets having to shoot raptors on the walls, and even had one of the thralls almost die because of it, but thankfully John Kenshi's a dog and managed to get the thrall over to Burns Tower to save his life before he bled out, or oiled out, no diddy. But that was really how the next several days would go. We'd gun down a group of river raptors at the gate, harvest our crops, and then put them into the new gardens, over quadrupling our crop yield. When we were waiting to harvest the crops, we upgraded our refineries, wells, and other equipment around the outpost, before finishing off the research queue for armor and weaponsmithing. It felt like everything was finally going our way, but all it takes is one wrong move to ruin everything. See, I'd sent Burn off to mine a bit more copper, and in that process, forgot to close the gate behind him. This, in turn, welcomed in a massive raptor pack to target our crops. Thinking on my feet, I sent Beep over to kite the raptors towards the front gate, causing the thralls to open fire on them. Again, a good plan in theory, but terrible in execution, as all this did was turn the raptors' focus to the harpoon gunners. At the time, John was mining iron to get back to strength training, so by the time he actually made it over to New Tahiti, everyone was already unconscious. He tried his best to save the day, but even the great John Kenshi was no match for the raptors and was quickly overwhelmed. With 2 weak thrall killed and all the crops destroyed, John managed to stabilize Beep and grab what little gear he could carry on his back before escaping into the unknown. He'd lost everything. His home, his friends, all of his hard work gone in the blink of an eye. What's next for John Kenshi? Where will he go from here? Will he ever actually do anything productive with his time, or will the remainder of his life be full of monotony and depression? Well, rumor has it he's on his way to the swamplands with plans to become a millionaire or something. Only time will tell though. Alright, if I can be honest, I was starting to get pretty bored with base building at this point and was looking for an excuse to move on to other things. If you've played Kenshi before, you know that once you get started on an outpost, that very quickly becomes the only thing you can focus on. There's constant raids, there's automating food supplies, building defenses, there's just always something bigger to do, another project to start, another battle to fight, and truth be told, after spending about 40 hours recording nothing but base building, I was getting tired of it. I had all these plans to craft my own armor and weapons and go on these massive killing sprees, but in reality, it's been 80 days, and this might be the lowest overall skill level I've ever had on a character at this point. And to be blunt, I much prefer my cheesy old ways of playing the game. Is this the end of John Kenshi's journey? No, not even close. I've got several follow-up projects that I'm working on that feature him heavily. It just won't be centered around an Ironman style of play. That being said, I'm gonna get out of here. Until next time, I appreciate you all. Stay safe, and thanks for stopping by.